The moment we begin to understand that we didn't just show up here, a lot of things begin to change. We didn't just show up. There was a thought process in our coming. There was a planning in our coming. Your calling is a position. Your purpose is the reason or the thing you are meant to achieve in that position. You cannot talk about purpose without faith. Because at the end of the day, why do we need a purpose? Why? Why bother?
Okay, we are right back. We're ready to talk about how to detoxify your ego. And you haven't subscribed to Salt Nation TV, please take a moment right now to subscribe.
Hello guys, how are you all doing? It's been a while. We had the Just Saying podcast. I'm excited to come to you again with another episode of the Just Saying podcast. Today we're starting another series on discovering and fulfilling your purpose. We're going to be talking about how to discover and how to fulfill your purpose. Very funny story about how I came about discussing this topic in this series. Few weeks ago, I was thinking about the next series to launch and to discuss, and the question of purpose just kept coming up. But when it kept coming up, I knew the work that I had to put in to come up with, the outline and all of that, and I kind of was delaying it, a little bit, and almost like a confirmation that this was something that was needed, that people needed to hear. Like a week later, someone called me, one of my younger friends called me and started asking me questions about his purpose and what I thought his purpose was and my view about what his purpose was based on my knowledge of him. And that was the first I was like, okay. And like the next week, I received a call. I was invited to minister somewhere, and then they told me the topic was purpose-driven life, and I was like, all right, so this is really something that needs to come out some way. So that was how I knew that this is something that we needed to talk about. And here we are. We're going to be discussing on the purpose-driven life, how to discover and how to fulfill your purpose. We're going to be discussing this topic in three parts, right? So the first, we're going to talk about what purpose is. What is purpose? How do you identify what purpose is? The second episode, we're going to be talking about how to discover your own purpose. How do you discover it? How do you find out what you're called to do, what your purpose is? And then the third part, we're going to be talking about what the distractions from purpose is. So these are the three episodes we're going to be doing in this series. So let us go, and I'll be right back.
My name is Enyinaya Kachi, a graduate of pharmacy from 7 years ago, and a poster child for Nigerian unemployment. This is a day in the life of a young Nigerian hustler. Hustle. How you survive through life every day.
Hello guys, and welcome back to this beautiful episode, how to discover and fulfill your purpose. Today we're talking about what is purpose, and I've listed out a few ideas of how we can define purpose, how you can understand purpose. And we're going to be doing a lot of reflection from scriptures, from the Bible, because you can't accurately talk about purpose if you do not speak about the source of all purpose, right? So take for instance, there's nothing that really springs into existence without the initiative of a creator, without the initiative of one who gets the ball rolling. Many times when we have conversations with people who are more inclined to science, one of the greatest arguments that they have is that the earth just became. Life just came to be. By one spontaneous explosion, everything came to be. But the question becomes, if the very first forms of life preceded other forms of life, which preceded other forms of life and preceded other forms of life, it goes to reason that if you go back long enough, there has to be an initial cause. There has to be the first thing that preceded all things, right? And that thing, by whatever name you choose to call it, is what we call God, is who we call God. Now, a lot of people call it nature. A lot of people call it all kinds of things. But that is who we as Christians refer to as God. That is the person that we worship as God. The one who caused all things to begin. So we cannot really be discussing the topic of purpose if we do not talk about, if we not look into the Word of God and hear what the Lord has said about our purpose. So to discuss what is purpose, we're going to be doing a lot of reflection on scriptures. Now, whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, you're going to get a lot of value from this, because the end goal of this teaching is to find a way to live a life that is purposeful, that has a point to it. Because one of the most frustrating things you can ever do in life is live a purposeless life. That, you're just living a life where you're just surviving. You're born, you go to school, you grow old, you marry, you give birth to children, you buy a dog, you die. That's basically all you live for, right? So that purposelessness is actually the root cause of depression, is the root cause of all kinds of suicide, is the root cause of all kinds of addictions. Whenever a man or a woman is without a very definite purpose that they are pursuing, you find that they start trying to fill up their life with activities, actions, pursuits, all kinds of things that are often very harmful to them. And many people end up in so many desperate places because they are trying to find out, why am I here? The two most important questions that every human being must answer is, who am I and why am I here? Who am I and why am I here? And I hope that by the time we're done with this conversation, you are going to be able to answer those two questions. So what is purpose? Let's dive right into it. Number one definition of what purpose is, it is your purpose are predestined works. Predestined works, or as the Bible puts it, they are works that we are beforehand prepared for you to do. Right? If you look at the Bible in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 10, it says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. We are his workmanship. So we are every human being is a project. Every human being is an ongoing project. God is doing something. The divine is working out a certain plan. Right? So we are his workmanship. We are on a table. The potter is making us. We are in process. Which is why I always advise people, don't give up on yourself. It's too early. We are his workmanship. Even if you're living a life that is purposeless now, you don't see the point. You're living a life that is just full of so many disappointments, and you're just wondering, why exactly am I here? What am I doing here? The first thing I want you to understand is that we are his workmanship. So it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. And what is he working out? He says he's working on us to prepare us for good works that he has set aside, predestined for us to do before we showed up on the scene. Right? So in many theological circles, there's a lot of conversation about those who are pro-predestination and those who are against predestination. While I'm not going to dive into that argument right now, you cannot understand purpose if you do not at least acknowledge a certain level of predestination. Because your purpose is not something you figure out and choose to do. If your purpose is something you figure out and choose to do, then it's not a purpose, it's a goal. I can pick a goal and say, this is what I want to achieve today, and then I achieve it. That's a goal. Its source is from me. I decided to do it. But if you say that something is purpose, take for instance, if I buy a new shoe, a very solid Italian shoe with very strong soles, right? I can choose to use that shoe, flip it, use the sole, and start knocking in nails into wood. It probably will work first or second time before it starts damaging the shoe, because that is not its purpose. The purpose of the shoe is based on what the idea in the mind of its maker had in it. So there has to be something the maker had in mind for us to discuss purpose. So when we talk about predestination, you can't really discuss purpose if you do not believe in a certain level of predestination. You can talk about giving your life a purpose. You can talk about just outlining goals that you want to achieve, but you can't really talk about living a purpose-driven life if you do not believe in a certain level of predestination, that there are good works that have been set aside for you to do before you showed up. Right? So the workmanship is that God is working us into people who are able to work out those good works. Right? So every challenge you faced, every difficulty you faced in your life, every success, everything you've prevailed over is the process of God working you out. So once you understand this, you find out that you can't waste your pain. You can't waste your success. Everything works together into the tapestry of who you are becoming. And who is that person you are becoming? The person who is set aside to fulfill these good works. So your purpose is good works that are set aside before you showed up on the scene. There was something designed for you to achieve. There was something designed specifically for you to achieve. And so when we talk about purpose, that is what we are trying to get to. The second thing is that purpose is works that you are specifically fashioned to do. Right? It's works that you are specifically fashioned to do. So this follows from the first point. If the first point is that there are works predestined for you to walk in before you showed up, then it stands to reason that there are also things within you, your predispositions, your traits, your temperament, your likes, your talents, your passions that have made you specific to be the one that can achieve those good works. Right? So your purpose are works that you are specifically fashioned to do. And I like to say it this way, that every tool and equipment that you require for your purpose is follow-come. It came with you from the moment you were born. You came with a certain design. And once you understand, there are so many uniquenesses that many people experience in their life, and they just find out they're just so different in so many ways. And because the world that we live in is one that wants to force everybody to be in the same mold. You know, there's one of the things you see, social media, they say trend. For you to trend, basically, you have to do what every other person is doing. You have to hop on a trend to trend, right? And so the world is creating a system where it is standardizing humanity. Everybody is becoming the same thing, think the same way, talk the same way, act the same way, react the same way. And one of the things that this is achieving is that it is killing purpose in the lives of most people. Because until you understand your uniqueness and appreciate it and embrace it, you cannot walk in your purpose. There are so many people who are looking at their uniqueness as a disadvantage, who are looking at the things that they feel because it doesn't align to what is acceptable, or what is often seen as cool, or what is often seen as the in thing. They think it is a disadvantage. But once you begin to understand that your purpose is something you are specifically fashioned to do, right? When Gideon was hiding and threshing wheat in the wine press at the time when Israel was under oppression, and the Bible says that the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and told him, and the way he hailed him first of all shocked Gideon. He said, "Oh, thou mighty man of valor." Gideon looked at himself and said, "Who? First of all, I'm hiding in a wine press threshing wheat because I'm afraid of the Amalekites. I'm afraid of what they're going to do to me. And secondly, he started giving his CV. I'm the least in my family. My family is the least in my clan. My clan is the least in Israel." So basically, Gideon was the least person in Israel, if you're going to estimate it that way. But that was the person God appeared to. And when he finished arguing with God, God said something to him. He said, "Go in the strength that you already have and save Israel." God did not say, "I'm going to give you strength. I'm going to come upon you." So Gideon was hiding in cowardice, not knowing that within him was a strength and a courage that even he had not discovered. He did not know within him certain skill sets, leadership skill sets that were ingrained in his personality, right? But he was so coward in his own adversity that he did not recognize it. So your purpose are the works that you are specifically fashioned to do. The third thing is that your purpose is the will of God for you. That's the summary of what it is the will of God for you. Now you'll find that from number 1 to number 2 and number 3, we are still saying the same thing, but I'm just trying to rehash them in different ways so they sync, right? Is God's will for you. That's the simplest way of defining purpose, right? In Jeremiah 1 verse 5, the Bible was talking about Jeremiah, and it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." The moment we begin to understand that we didn't just show up here, a lot of things begin to change. We didn't just show up. There was a thought process in our coming. There was a planning in our coming, right? There's something that preceded our coming that laid the foundation. So the country you were born in was intentional. The family you were born in was intentional. Everything is nothing about you is a mistake. Even if you are born out of wedlock, even if you are born, no matter what the circumstances of your birth is, it is not a mistake, because all of those things will work together to enable you to achieve your purpose, right? So it's the will of God for you. He says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, this was God speaking to Jeremiah. He says, I knew you. He says, before you were born, I set you apart and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. So imagine that before, he didn't say when he was born. He said, before he was born, I knew you. So Jeremiah existed before he was born. Do you get what I'm saying? The you that is you, which is not your flesh and is not your mind, is the real you, your spirit, existed before you came into consciousness. And God said to Jeremiah, I knew you, I set you apart, and appointed you as a prophet to the nations before he was born, right? So it's the will of God for you that was decided before you showed up, right? The fourth thing is that your purpose is the basis of your calling. Is the basis of your calling. Now, I like to differentiate between purpose and calling, because oftentimes we misunderstand it. And when we talk about these terms, purpose, calling, many times we so spiritualize these things that we forget that the place of purpose and the place of calling transcends the four walls of a church. Every human being on the face of the earth has a purpose, has a calling. And many times God even calls and uses people who are not born again, do not believe in him. And he still sets them up to achieve a specific purpose on the earth. So when I'm talking about purpose and calling, it's not just from a spiritual lens. The reason I'm coming from scripture is because, like I said, you can't really understand it if you do not agree that there's a source from which all things proceed, right? So it's the basis of your calling. So what that means is that it is the reason behind your calling. Your calling is a position. Your purpose is the reason or the thing you are meant to achieve in that position. So take, for instance, the people who are called to be pastors, the people who are called to be doctors, the people who are called to be filmmakers like myself, there are people who are called to be in the media, there are people who are called to be in finance, there are people who are called to be in services, there are people who are called to be in the health services, there are people who are just called to be. Your calling is a position, is a placement, but it is not your purpose. Your calling is not your purpose, but your purpose is the basis for your calling, or the reason. So your purpose is what you are meant to achieve in the place of your calling. So which is why you can have two pastors, but their emphasis are different. One of them talks so much about healing, one talks so much about salvation. That doesn't mean that the one that talks about healing does not believe in salvation, or the one that talks about salvation does not believe in healing. But there's a burning passion in their heart that pushes them towards the direction of a specific emphasis. Because while both of them have the same calling, they do not have the same purpose. Right? So someone can be called into the medical field, but there's a purpose, there's something that drives him, that drove him to the medical field, and that same thing keeps him in the medical field and pushes him to walk a certain way, approach his work a certain way. Someone is called into academia as a teacher, as a professor, and you find that the way they do it is not just a job, because they found that place is their calling, but then they have a purpose to achieve in that place, right? So it's the basis for your calling, right? The last point we're going to be talking about today, the fifth one, is that it is a fight and it is a race that is undergirded by faith. It's a fight, it's a race that is undergirded by faith. You cannot talk about purpose without faith. You cannot talk about purpose without faith. Because at the end of the day, why do we need a purpose? Why? Why bother? Why do I have to burden myself with a purpose? Why not just flex and live life and get by? Why do I need a purpose? There has to be something I'm looking forward to. And for us as believers, we know there's a reward. It's a fight. It's a race, but it has to be undergirded by faith. Because The God who has called us to do these things, he knows that we need a reward. Like in organizational structure, for instance, everybody knows that for peak performance, you have to give incentives. And while it is true that we serve God out of love, God himself has set in the cosmos that he who works will get rewards. He who serves him will be rewarded. For us as believers, we know that the ultimate reward is that we will see him face to face. Right? We know that's the ultimate reward. But even while we are here on earth, we believe, Jesus was speaking to his disciples and said, you will receive those who leave mother and father and so many things to follow me. He says, you will receive here on earth and in eternity 100-fold. So you will receive it here and you will also receive it there. So we know. So there's a faith component to purpose. If you remove the faith components to purpose, then you lose the reason, the why behind it, right? Like Paul was saying something. Paul said, I fought the fight. So I said it's a fight. He said, I finished the race, but I have kept the faith. So it was necessary for Paul to preserve his faith while running the race and fighting the fight, because in the bid to pursue purpose, many people do not know when they cross over from purpose to ambition, to selfish ambition, I mean. Because ambition in itself is not wrong, but selfish ambition, where they start pursuing just a certain, self-aggrandizement. And I'll be talking more about this in the next episode, but it's very easy for you if your pursuit of purpose is not undergirded by faith, your faith being an anchor on the one who has called, an anchor on the one who has designed you and fashioned you to pursue, so much so that every step you take, you have recourse to him. If your pursuit of purpose rather is unhinged from your faith in God, that is why you see a lot of people in secular society, even in the church, who in the bid to pursue purpose enter all sorts of depravity. There are so many people that we have seen who we said, wonderful, this person is a believer, he has entered politics, and then he goes there, becomes the governor, messes both himself and the church up. And you're wondering what's wrong? Because the person was pursuing purpose but did not keep the faith. I often tell, when I was teaching about purpose, where I ministered some weeks ago, I made a statement. I said, Anna Amaka, but this journey of purpose. What that means is that you can be on a journey of purpose and someone picks your pocket. And oftentimes what they are trying to get, the devil is not necessarily, he's not afraid of someone pursuing purpose. He's afraid of someone who is pursuing purpose guided by the instruction of God. Someone who is pursuing purpose in line with what God has designed for them. Not just someone who has figured out a purpose and is pursuing it. Right? It's very easy to get into error. It's very easy to get into a selfish pursuit. It's very easy to fall into all kinds of depravity if you do not keep the faith. So Paul said, I fought the good fight, I finished the race, but I've kept the faith. And it was necessary that Paul kept the faith. They didn't pick his pocket, they didn't steal his faith. It was necessary that he kept the faith for him to look back at the end of his life and say, I've done it all. I've done it all. And he says, now there remains for me a crown. So speaking about his reward, he knew there was a reward because he had kept his faith, right? So just to summarize today, a purpose-driven life, therefore, would mean a life that is a life where every decision, every direction, every disposition is taken in consideration of your purpose and the fulfillment of your purpose. If you live a life where you just make decisions without considering your purpose, what is the overarching purpose for which I'm here, it falls down to decisions like who you marry, falls down to decisions like where you live. Should I leave the country or should I stay in the country? All of these things factor into decisions that you make. A purpose-driven life is a life where all decisions, small and large, are taken with recourse to the consideration of what your purpose is and how that decision would help you fulfill your purpose. So that's where we're going to end it for today, right? We've been discussing what is purpose, and today we've talked about the 5 rudimentary things, definitions of purpose. Number 1, purpose are predestined works that have been set aside for you to achieve before you showed up. Number 2, there are works that are specifically fashioned for you to do. Number 3, it is the will of God for you. Number 4, it is the basis of your calling. And number 5, it is a fight, it is a race that is undergirded by faith. Please, if you have any questions, drop it in the comment section, where I would be trying to incorporate it into the teachings, into the further episodes, and maybe your questions might even inform another additional episode. Please, if you have not yet subscribed to Salt Nation TV, take a moment to subscribe, drop your comments, like it, share it. Please, your likes, your comments help the algorithm push out this content more and more, and we need as many eyes as possible to see these videos. So please help us. So a large percentage of people who watch these videos are not subscribed. More than 70% are not subscribed. So please do us a favor to subscribe to this channel, and we can promise you there's much more juicy stuff where this came from. Till we see again, I remain Sir Victory. There's so much I might have said in this podcast that you agree with. There might be some you don't agree with. But what do I know? I'm just saying. I'll see you again next time right here on the Just Saying podcast. Ciao.
If you haven't subscribed to Salt Nation TV, please take a moment right now to subscribe.